Justice for Africa. Thank you so much for joining, and we hope that, as usual, this event this evening is going to be very educating, like our past webinars and spaces have been. So, thank you so much for joining once again, and we hope that you have a very insightful time. This evening, this particular webinar was organized to commemorate the Restorative Justice Week, which is usually celebrated from the 16th to the 22nd of November every year. And as an organization that tries to project the gospel of restorative justice, we deemed it fit to organize a webinar to wrap up the week for this particular year, 2025. My name is Adeusi Esther, and I will be anchoring this event this evening. So today, the title of our webinar says Advancing Restorative Justice in Nigeria, Measuring Success, Understanding Challenges, and Charting the Future. So over the years, we realized that we need to measure success. We need to understand where we're coming from and where we are at the moment. We need to understand the challenges that were faced over time, and we need to chart the future in order to ensure that restorative justice even makes much more mark than it already is at the moment. This evening we have a very remarkable speaker in our midst, Miss Jessica. Dr. Jessica, please, can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, I can. Good evening. Yes, I can. Sorry.
Yes, ma. Thank you so much for joining us. I would be reading a very remarkable profile and would start in earnest. So, Imukeme Emike Jessica, please, I hope that I am pronouncing your name properly, ma. I'm very sorry if I am not. MCI ARB AICMC PhD is a distinguished legal professional with a strong background in criminal justice litigation, human rights advocacy, and academia. She began her career at Ricky Taffa, SAN and Co., and gained significant experience under Omoruyi Omonua, SAN. Dr. Jessica developed a keen interest in criminal justice at Chief Chris Uche SAN and Co. Pardon. As a legal program attorney at Access to Justice Nigeria, she engaged in litigation, legal drafting, and advocacy on law enforcement brutality and extrajudicial killings. Dr. Jessica holds an LLB from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Ghana, a BL from the Nigerian Law School, Abuja, an MSc from Durham University, UK, and an LLM from Nsukka, Nigeria. She obtained her doctorate degree from Now University. In academia, Dr. Jessica was a pioneer lecturer at Edo State University, Uzaru, and later joined Bayes University as a lecturer, clinical supervisor, and coordinator of the Alternative Dispute Resolution Unit of the Faculty Law Clinic. She is a member of the Nigerian Bar Association, the International Bar Association, Durham Centre for Research into Violence and Abuse in the UK, and Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. She serves as the secretary of the Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Committee and the editorial board Law Journal Committee of the NBA Cradle Bar. Additionally, she is the Director of Operations and Research at Healthcare Advocacy Initiative, advocating for patients' rights and healthcare system improvements. Dr. Jessica is also a believer and a great lover of God. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Jessica with me. Welcome again, Ma. Thank you for joining
Thank you
us.
so much.
Yes,
Thank
so
you
we'll
so
be
much.
starting. Thank you for joining us. I
Yeah.
have a couple of questions, Ma,
Okay,
and
sure.
I'll just ask while you give us a very detailed answer. And while the section is going on, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat and I'll ask during the course of the webinar. So first of all, generally we know that when we are asked for the definition of something, it is very difficult to box everything that a particular concept entails into one definition. But I'd like
Mhm.
for you to give us a working definition of restorative justice as you see it. What do you think restorative justice is, Ma?
Okay, so thank you for this opportunity to speak and to shed more light on this very innovative concept that is now gaining a lot of attention and traction in Nigeria, which is restorative justice. So there are many definitions or working definitions of restorative justice, but the one that I usually like to ascribe or align with is one I think that was put forward by Professor John Braithwaite. And he describes restorative justice as a victim centered, accountability driven approach to justice that focuses on repairing harm. So the term repairing harm is in terms of focusing on the crime that has taken place or the pain that has been suffered by the victim in a situation that involves criminal offending. So it focuses on repairing the harm caused by crime, and then it brings together the victim, the offender, and affected community members if that has taken place, and they come together voluntarily to discuss the impact of the offense and then address the accountability or the measures that need to be taken place in order to repair the harm that has occurred between the victim and the offender and the members of the community. So it's not necessarily about punishment per se, it's more about repairing the harm, like I said, healing, accountability, and then restoring the relationship that was broken down as a result of the crime that took place. So that's the working definition. It may sound like a lot of words put together, but the key things I want those who are listening to take out is the parties are the victim, the offender, and members of the community. The entire purpose of them coming together is not to punish the offender, but to find a way to resolve the harm that has occurred as a result of the crime that took place, and then restore relationships between the parties towards an outcome that brings healing for the victim and then restitution for the community.
Thank you very much, Ma. I think that very much sums it up. But generally, there's this notion that, restorative justice is something that is alien to us as Nigerians, or that, oh, say it started 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I'd like for you to give us a brief history of restorative justice. Has it always been around, or did we
Mhm.
adopt it somehow? So I'd like for you to give us a very brief history of restorative justice in Nigeria.
Okay, so if you do some research in this area of restorative justice, you would hear that most of the comments or most of the books trace or find restorative justice roots situated in countries like the US, like America, Canada, Australia. Like there's a lot of talk about restorative justice emanating from these places, but those who have done again research on the roots, the real roots of restorative justice or the African roots of restorative justice, have found that restorative justice is not new to us. Before we had our traditional criminal justice system, that's pre-colonial, before we experienced colonialism, there were ways we resolved criminal offending in our society that did not involve the court system or persons that we describe as lawyers. We had age groups, we had elders who came together when a person had been harmed by another member of the community, and the aim again in those situations was more restorative than it was punitive, even if there were some even punitive measures that were taking place. But the punitive measures were allowed with the motive or with the intention that the person will eventually be restored back into the community so that the community is stronger for it. So restorative justice has roots in our African community. In Nigeria specifically, virtually all the tribes have, root or have take or what would I how would I describe it now? Have restorative justice practices and ideals involved in their conflict resolution from time immemorial before we now started hearing it in its formal terms, currently in Nigeria. Things that had to do with victim offender mediation, it was already taking place in our communities. We may not have described it as victim offender mediation, but that is what it was. So this principle of healing, even if you go to countries like maybe South Africa, they call it ubuntu healing. All of these things were always there in our African community. So it's not something that is foreign to us. It has its roots in Africa.
Yes, ma'am. So I do understand that it has its roots in Africa. And, upon colonialism, we started to shed off some of these things and started to embrace the punitive measures that the
Mhm.
colonial masters brought to us. So
Yes.
I would like to know, at what point did we start to realize that these punitive measures are not exactly helping us, and we need to go back to our roots? We need to bring back this restorative justice system. Was there a point that marked the turning point in Nigeria for that? And how has it been since then till now?
I may not be able to trace the exact point by maybe stating a particular year and saying that, okay, it was this point that this, we had an epiphany and then we decided to turn, towards the restorative angle of the criminal justice system. But I know that for a while, just like how, let me draw a parallel. We there's something we call ADR that has to do with alternative dispute resolution, more practice more in the civil aspect of law. There was a time where all we knew in this country had to do with the traditional formal criminal justice system, but we found out that it was not meeting several of the needs of the parties. Mind you, our criminal justice system is plagued by many issues, delays, high costs, so many things. And so there was that move towards the use of ADR. So on a similar trajectory, looking at the criminal justice system, we too, that aspect also was experiencing a lot of challenges with the fact that victims were basically not given a voice in the process. So the traditional criminal justice system was not victim centered. The only role victims played was just to come and testify. But justice, as they deemed it, was not, they were not given a seat at the table to determine what they required or what they felt was justice when they had suffered harm. Then of course the high rate of recidivism, somebody goes to jail, is incarcerated, comes back, repeat offending, then we have the issues of prison overcrowding. Every little offense is one that a magistrate or a judge will just send somebody to jail, for whatever reason. Even the issue of pretrial detainees and persons awaiting trial, mounting the number of persons awaiting trial and mounting every day in our correctional centers. So these are just a few of some of the issues that plagued our criminal justice system. So I think the question now started to arise: is there a better way to do this? Looking at other crimes, is there a way to address some of these systemic challenges we're experiencing in the criminal justice system? And I would say that the step rather that moved us in the direction towards a more restorative approach to criminal justice, sorry, is when we had the ACJA, that's the Ammunition of Criminal Justice Act, enacted in 2015. If you look at the preamble and the objective of that act, you will see that it embodies a lot of the principles that had to do with restorative justice. I think one of the objectives there is to bring together the victim, the offender, and the community to resolve the harm that has taken place as a result of crime. That is restorative justice terminology. And then you can now see under the ACJA we have non-custodial measures like parole, community service, and then just a general tilt from predominant punitive measures to other non-punitive measures that embody the ideals of restorative justice. So I would say that because of all the issues we were experiencing, and we are still experiencing in the criminal justice system, and then with the enactment of the ACJA 2015, I would pinpoint that as the pivotal point in our history where this concept of restorative justice began to gain traction and attention.
Thank you very much for that, Ma. So, over time, what would you say are the successes that we've recorded in the use of restorative justice in our criminal justice system?
Okay, I may sound a bit I may not give the answer that we want because this is restorative justice week. So, we it would be nice to say this, but I would, say in honesty or in honesty that restorative justice is still at its baby stage in Nigeria. It's still at its formative stages in Nigeria. But I'm not sad about that because better late than never. With the enactment of the AGJA 2015, because although, like I said, it embodied a lot of the restorative ideals that we know restorative justice, is aligned with, it wasn't very overt. It did not put within its structures measures that had to do with restorative justice. It kind of just brushed it a little bit. And if there is no law that supports any of these concepts and then there is no structure to support it, there's not much that can be done. So that's why there's a lot of move now in several states supported by international organizations like ROLAC, International IDEA, even REJA, to educate the different states, the necessary agents in the different states to incorporate restorative justice in the traditional criminal justice system by enacting practice directions, policy framework or policy guidelines, even the enactment of a restorative justice bill or a restorative justice law. These are some of the things that states are now doing so that we can actually formally integrate restorative justice into our criminal justice system. So I would say I don't know that we've made so much progress. I know some states, obviously, like Lagos State, Enugu, even the FCT, we have started taking steps towards utilizing restorative justice. In the Lagos State Multi-Door Courthouse, they provide restorative justice service, even in Enugu as well. And in the FCT now, that is something that is coming up. I think this year, the Multi-Door Courthouse carried out trainings for neutrals and persons that facilitators who will now be restorative justice facilitators in the Abuja multi-door courthouse. So some of these steps are being taken. And it's not only, just to also clarify, restorative justice is not centered on the criminal justice system alone. It can also be used in schools. It can be used in, anything that has to do with conflict that will not require, delving into the traditional criminal justice process. For example, myself and a member of your team, Chibueze, participated in a truth telling circle this year. It didn't really have anything to do with the criminal justice system per se. It was just about making or gathering persons together to talk about how something I think it had to do with e-hailing services, people who patronize or who are drivers with Bolt and Uber drivers. They have suffered several harms in the course of carrying out their jobs. And these international organizations like Bolt and Uber have refused to provide restitution to them. So we organized a truth telling circle, brought the Federal Ministry of Transport, the president of the Labour Congress, we brought so many stakeholders to come together to hear from the victims, their families, how they suffered, and then come up with an agreement as to how to resolve some of the issues that they were currently facing. So that had nothing to do with the criminal justice system, but we were able to achieve that, and there will be another one in February. So whilst restorative justice progress is still I'll call it, is still growing in little bits. It is in the criminal justice system. It is still being utilized outside of the criminal justice system in different aspects. So I think there is progress being made. And I believe that by next year, when many states have adopted practice directions and policy documents and laws, it will be formally integrated into our traditional criminal justice system. I also hear that the ACJA is under review. And I believe that one of the review that the ACJA 2015 will experience is formally integrating restorative justice into several sections of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. So that will help as well.
Yes, ma'am. So I really do agree that while the successes are not that much, we are making progress. We are not where we were last year.
Yes.
Yes. And I'm also hoping that this time next year, when something like this will be happening at REJA, we'll have much more to say in terms of
Yes.
successes. But for us to be able to do all of that, we need to also identify the challenges that we faced over time. It is when we identify these challenges that we can even work on them to achieve better results. So my next question would be, what are the challenges and obstacles that we faced, in adopting restorative justice in the Nigerian context? Because Nigeria is a very peculiar state, considering the fact that we have, several religions, several ethnic groups too. So in the Nigerian context, what are the challenges and the obstacles that we faced over time that is impeding the
Mm.
integration of restorative justice?
Okay, I would say, first of all, because in a country like Nigeria, for you to really achieve anything of this magnitude, there must be some infrastructural support and legislative support for it. And like I already said, with the ACJA, even though it embodies restorative justice ideal, it did not, create a framework that embeds restorative justice wholesomely into our criminal justice process. It just did not. And so that has, made all the efforts that we are making, not as it has not given us a platform really to stand where restorative justice can really be embedded wholesomely in our criminal justice system. So I think I would say limited legislative framework, even with the fact that restorative justice is explicitly stated in the NCOS, that's the Nigerian Correctional Services Act. That is the tail end. That is at the corrections comes at the end of the criminal justice will and system. So it would have been better if the AGJA, embodied it, then supported by what is provided in the Nigerian Correctional Services Act. So that legal framework is lacking. Then also there is not too much buying. I think there's not too much buying in with our criminal justice stakeholders. I just like it was on Tuesday and Wednesday. I consulted for in with a ROLAC to help validate some documents on restorative justice for the Edo State Ministry of Justice. And whilst I was there, we had stakeholders from EFCC, we had stakeholders from the Director of Public Prosecutions, and some of the concerns they raised is still bordering on the fact that they still see the punitive aspect of our justice process as predominant. They feel like restorative justice is a way of giving people a slap on the wrist. It doesn't have a deterrent effect. It's something that can be abused, just like how people say plea bargain, for example, is being abused within the criminal justice process. So there's not much buy-in as much as we would love from our criminal justice stakeholders. And I think that again brings me to the next issue, which is low awareness, public awareness on what restorative justice really is. It's not a soft, what people describe as soft justice, whereby an offender will just get a slap on the wrist. No, it is quite hard for someone to admit that they've done something wrong. It's easy to lie and keep saying that you did not do it and not take any form of responsibility. So there are some punitive, and I put that in quotes, aspects of restorative justice that are more constructive than just causing the offender harm, like you would see with incarceration or even the death sentence. There are more ways to make someone accountable that may create a punitive effect than the way we are practicing retributive justice in Nigeria. So I feel no buy-in from our criminal justice stakeholders, which is as a result of lack of public awareness on what restorative justice really is. And then, we don't have any infrastructural support for it. Ordinarily we should have restorative justice centers in all states. That's how it is in other countries. They have restorative justice centers, and then from there restorative justice units that you find in schools, in the police station, in the corrections, you understand. But we don't have that framework here in Nigeria yet. So I think that is one of the challenges we are also experiencing. So yeah, I think these are just a few of our challenges.
Okay, thank you very much, Master. I really do agree with all of the challenges, because these are things that we see every day, where you're even in court and you're trying to plead a restorative justice approach for your client, and it's beginning to look like, oh, you just want your client to go free,
Yeah.
go scot-free and not get punished. And even the judges, the magistrates, they're not buying it, just like you said, because I don't know, I think it's just the fact that it
Yes.
has been planted into our heads that justice has to be punitive and that's the only way
Yes.
people learn and all of that. But
Yeah.
again, it's also an awareness problem. If people don't know that it is not just for us to let people go without getting punished, they will continue to see it that way. And I think this
Yes.
is why REJA does what we do with the webinars, the Twitter spaces, just so that we can bring people's attention to what restorative justice actually means. And now that we've acknowledged and identified the challenges that we've had over time, how do you think we can solve them? What are the practical ways? Because it's easy to say, oh, we will raise more awareness. It's easy to say a lot of things, but these things are easier said than done. So, how exactly can we solve these problems? What are the practical solutions that you can prefer?
I mean, I'm sorry, can the person be muted? Okay. I feel personally, I know you were going to say do more awareness, and it may sound like, oh, that's just I'm sermonizing, but that's just really what it is. The solutions are clear. We need to spread more awareness. Awareness serves the role of re-education. If you don't spread more awareness to educate, especially our criminal justice, for now, our criminal justice stakeholders, so you can get their buy-in, even if we have the legal framework in place, they will resist it because they still think that it is not going to achieve a deterrent effect, or it's not going to really give justice to a victim and all of that. Like they may feel like, are we now mediating criminal issues? Why should we mediate criminal issues? The aspect should, or the focus must always be punitive. So awareness is a very key thing that we need to do in terms of re-educating our criminal justice stakeholders so that they can unlearn and relearn what really conflict resolution is about. It doesn't have to be adversarial. It can be reconciliatory in nature, and there will still be deterrence, there will be accountability, and justice will be served. Because what is justice for you may not be justice for me. So that level of flexibility should be accommodated, and that this is something that they need to be taught. You understand? Then we need to strengthen our legal frameworks, of course. Well, like I said, the ACJA is currently under review, and my hope is that when it is eventually passed, they would be incorporated into every aspect of the criminal justice, process, from the point of arrest to the point of detention. They would be incorporated. They will be incorporated. What do they call it? Into these stages, restorative justice measures and frameworks, so that formally that resistance that you spoke about from judges, magistrates will not be there, because when you point them to the law, they cannot say anything. Then it will now be supported by practice directions, infused into sentencing guidelines. The sky is our limit. Once all of these things are in place, then restorative justice would gain a lot of traction. And then yes, after that, infrastructural support. Like we all know, we all praise the ACJA 2015 for all the innovative, provisions that it has. But one of the major things that has really, impeded the effect that the ACJA 2015 could have done, and in several states, is poor infrastructural support for it. So it's only now that I'm hearing about, moves towards probation and parole and all of that, because the corrections did not have the infrastructural support to monitor, or develop a probation system or a parole system and all of that. So whilst all these things are written in black letter, the effect, not much has been done, because there was no infrastructural support. So now, with support from international agencies and even support from the Ministry of Interior, there is now some move towards supporting the provisions of ACJA with infrastructural support. So the same thing with restorative justice. And then, partner with other stakeholders, not just of course, the key criminal justice stakeholders, like the police, security agencies generally, the police, EFCC, NDLE, all these people, NAPTIP, our lawyers, through partnership with the MBA. In the MBA, we can help in educating our lawyers on the benefit of restorative justice, corrections. In fact, when it comes to restorative justice, for my interaction with restorative justice so far, I believe corrections are the most willing stakeholders when it comes to restorative justice. They have units now. At least I can speak for Abuja, and even in those states where I just came from, they have restorative justice units now in the Nigerian Correctional Center. So I really applaud them. So this we need support from these people, even religious leaders. Restorative justice is very much connected um religious the religious aspect of our society, like with priests, with imam. They support restorative justice because of his ideals that have to do with reconciliation, forgiveness, and healing. So support from these people will also be beneficial to move restorative justice propaganda forward. So yeah, I think those are some of the things that we can do. Make sure again that when we start to use restorative justice in our criminal justice system, we ensure that the victim is protected. So risk assessment, several protocols need to be in place so that the whole thing is not being abused and people are not hurt in any way. Because when you put a victim and offender together, let it not be that you will now create re-victimization and other things that will cause more harm than good. So whilst we are pushing for it to be used, all the structures really do need to be in place. So victim sensitive protocols need to be established in all the units or centers where restorative justice is being applied. So yeah, there are more, but these are the few that I would, speak on. Oh, I was also going to say training of our judges, the NJI, even REJA, organizations like REJA, can work with NJI to train our judges and magistrates on restorative justice and the benefits that it stands to serve in our criminal justice system.
Yes, ma'am, and I believe that Regis did a very good job on that because I
Yes.
believe that we have vocational trainings with judges in several states, but we can do more and we hope to do more in the coming years. I was also going to add that, or should I say, ask that when we talk about, things like this, there's the role that young people have to play. These days, the Nigerian Bar Association even have an arm for young lawyers because they
Yeah.
recognize young lawyers can do all of these things. And I remember that, when I was in 100 level in school, the whole idea of ADR was brought, like it was championed basically by the young lawyers in my school. So I wanted to add and ask that, in your opinion, what do you think the role of young people is in grounding restorative justice and also bringing awareness, especially in the aspect of students? Because many of us, even as law students, we didn't know what restorative justice was until life brought restorative justice to us. We didn't know what it was. So,
Yeah.
like ADR, do you have any ideas as to how we can incorporate young people into what restorative justice is about?
Okay, I think as an educator, myself, I think this is something I can speak to, and also speaking for my university. I may not be able to speak for all the universities, but I can use my university as a case study. So we've worked with REJA before. REJA has come, to speak to our students on restorative justice. They learned a lot. In fact, after that, we incorporated it in a test that was written to make sure that they really understood, what was spoken about. And we have in our law clinic, for example, I'm the ADRO law clinic coordinator. So, and now currently with CCMAS. So in the BMAS, that is our curriculum outline for legal education. We were operating a BMAS. Now they've brought out a CCMAS. In the CCMAS, one of the courses there is now ADRO. It's a course taught in 300 level, and I teach it in my university. So part of teaching ADRO means that I can now have the liberty, because of my expertise, to incorporate restorative justice into the curriculum for ADRO in my faculty. And then with that, we have partnerships in my clinic. We have partnerships with organizations like ICMC, although that not that they don't are not really focused on restorative justice. But again, I would love for us to even enter an MOU with REJA with for restorative justice. We work with the Abuja multi because now everybody knows my face and our students. Once they see me coming, oh, they are coming to speak to the director of the multi-door courthouse. They sit in to see some of the processes that are taking place. So I feel like now, because we are moving towards more experiential pedagogy in teaching, students are now, more exposed to concepts that like restorative justice, and they can participate in maybe victim offender mediations. We do simulations because restorative justice, like I said, is not really being practiced in Abuja. What we do in my class is we do simulations. So I create a scenario, they play it out as to victim offender mediation, so that in that way I can teach them what restorative justice can look like in practice. Again, when we have more restorative justice proceedings, they would now be able to sit in. I think we're supposed to this semester, just because semester was quite short, we had spoken to the is it deputy controller of the Nigeria Correctional Center to come to the correctional center in the FCT and visit with their restorative justice unit, so that they can see maybe how restorative justice is now being applied at the tail end of the criminal justice process, which is at persons who are incarcerated. So these are some of the measures that can take place to educate young people. Young people can then spread the word, go on their social media, educate people about the fact that it's not just about the traditional justice and criminal justice system. It doesn't always have to be adversarial. Victim offender mediation is there. Conferencing circles, these are alternatives to our traditional criminal justice process. And with them spreading the word, we are training the next generation. Because, like I said, the ones that were speaking at the conference I just attended, especially those who were resistant, they are coming from an educational system that taught them about retributive justice. It's not their fault. The cement is dry, although we are hoping to pour more water to make it, softer. But when you are training these ones now at this stage to recognize the beauty and the benefits of restorative justice, these are the next generation of judges, lawyers, policy makers. It will make it easier in the future when they now are in positions to push restorative justice forward, and create infrastructural support for it. So I think that's what we can do.
Yes, ma'am. I've really taken a lot away from all of this. For one, we can have a course on restorative justice, especially for people who are interested in criminal law. We could
Yeah.
also have simulations in class. I think that is
Yeah.
even one of the best ways for young people to actually learn these things, because
Mhm.
we can always hear the theory aspect of it, but we need to actually act it out and practice. So
Yeah.
I hope that the key players in the educational system or the legal educational system of Nigeria really incorporate these things, such that by next year we're not still talking about educating young people. We're saying that, oh, young people should be able to change the minds of the older
Yes.
ones into being receptive about restorative justice. And I think
Yes.
that worked very well. Also, there was a question in the chat that says,
Okay.
what practical roles can CSOs, I believe that's civil society organizations,
Organizations.
play in raising public awareness on restorative justice, especially among the criminal justice stakeholders?
In
I don't
fact,
know.
this yes, I got the question. I really applaud several of the CSOs that I've come in contact with. There's no restorative justice program, workshop, training that I've attended that I have not seen CSOs, present in our midst. There was one that was organized by Hill on people-centered justice, and they spoke, in the line of restorative justice, and there were so many CSOs in attendance. I feel like with the roles, with the ideals that these organizations embody, the major support they can provide is more in terms of advocacy and education, to train the minds of people. So they themselves need to build their expertise in restorative justice. You can't want to educate people on a concept that you do not fully understand. So they need to really, because now, even with the fact that restorative justice is coming up, there's still some misconception about what restorative justice is. So the theory and the foundational knowledge of what restorative justice is, ideals, need to be truly entrenched and understood. So CSOs can do that by working with criminal justice stakeholders to educate them on what restorative justice is. And they can also provide support. Like, for example, let me look at I'm not I want to use REJA for example. I think recently I was informed about the halfway house that REJA was able to establish to help persons who have been released, just to give them some support before they go it's part of the reintegration efforts of REJA. So CSOs who have support or international support and funding can do that, and work with restorative justice centers to provide this form of infrastructural support or reintegration support to offenders who may have experienced or had interaction with restorative justice, maybe while they are in custody. So these are some of the things that CSOs can do. I think that they have a major role to play in terms of advocacy, and then providing additional support to restorative justice centers.
All right, thank you very much for that, Ma.
Yeah.
So, on a final note, what do you think the future looks like for restorative justice in Nigeria? Are we headed for, I don't know, doom, or does it look like the future is bright? Are you optimistic, or it's the other way around? What do you think the future
Oh,
looks
I'm
like?
extremely optimistic. I was telling someone the other day that the first time I ever heard of restorative justice was in 2012, when I was doing my masters in Durham, and one of the professors there, who is like a authority figure on restorative justice, she has written a lot of books, taught us in a course, in a module called crime, violence and abuse. And I was so intrigued, so I decided to do my thesis on restorative justice. And then when I came back to the country in 2014, I was like, restorative justice. I can't really see much of that here. Then the ACJA was enacted, and I saw some little, reference made to it. And then compared to now, where we now have states, like there's so much work that is being done. Like I said, I mentioned Enugu, Lagos, Abuja, these states, Edo State, they are making major moves towards incorporating restorative justice in their criminal justice system. The I interacted with the head of the steering committee on restorative justice in Edo State, Justice Siswele, and she's so passionate. She's a judge, but she's so passionate about the effect that restorative justice can have on the criminal justice system in Edo State. So I know that in a couple of years, or not even like years, when I say years, it's 1 or 2, many of the states will enact restorative justice laws. They will have restorative justice centers. They would, there'll be more support, legislative support, institutional support. And that's why I keep saying that organizations like REJA should plug themselves in, especially at this state where, at this time where this thing is still growing, you understand, to put their footprint in history, that they were part of the organizations that help give structure to restorative justice implementation in Nigeria. So I really have like very high hopes on what restorative justice will do. Like I said, it is now plea bargain, using plea bargain as an example. When it first came in 2014, it seemed like, oh, plea bargain. What is that? But now, one of the judges that was at the program mentioned that most cases now that EFCC settles is on plea bargain. I don't know that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they don't want to investigate again. Once they just know that now they have the option, everything is on plea bargain. Do you understand? But this was something that was like, what, at the beginning? So it just needs to start. Once the ball gets rolling, the benefits will be seen as the restorative justice as a diversionary strategy, restorative justice for youth offenders, restorative justice in schools, restorative justice in corrections, restorative justice everywhere. like it's limitless. We just need to start and then plug ourselves in this stage that it is currently in Nigeria.
Okay, ma'am. So just one last thing from what you've said now, especially the EFCC part where we don't even know if it's a good or bad thing because it might just be that this whole thing is prompted by their laziness and all. So I think that I want to also ask that, in the case of the normal or the average Nigerian lawyer, say the
Mm,
prosecution or the defense counsels, do you think that it will get to a point where these things would be, fueled by maybe the prosecution's laziness or the defense counsel's eagerness to just finish the case and move on to the
mm,
next one? Because if
mm,
we're saying, oh, we want restorative justice, we want another way for us to resolve issues, are you worried that it will get to a point where the prosecution just wants to wrap it up and the defense counsel just wants to get their money and move on to the next
mhm.
case? Are you worried about that happening in the
I,
Nigerian time?
yes, I won't say worried, but I'm cautious. Again, that's why at this stage, anywhere I'm asked to speak on, I'm very big on risk assessment and procedure. Risk assessment and due process. That's the only way. Like, for example, police, they already use some form of victim offender mediation as a diversionary strategy when matters come to them. Say, for example, now that they are training them on restorative justice and they understand it's about bringing the victim and the offender to resolve the dispute and all of that, then we have an episode of domestic violence. Then the police officer that beats his wife at home now decides that, okay, now we've learnt about victim offender mediation and the benefits of restorative justice. Oh yeah, Oga, come stand here. Madam, stand here. Oh yeah, we are going to use restorative justice. Oga, what did you do? Blah 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 blah. He thinks he's using restorative justice, but there is no voluntariness. There is no informed consent, because these are the key things that must be in place. The one of the key components of restorative justice is that parties must agree to enter into it voluntarily. There must be informed consent about what will take place, and then what are the likely outcomes, so that parties can willingly enter. No form of duress. There must be genuine remorse. If there is no remorse and accountability taken by the offender, you cannot use restorative justice. You must plead guilty. You must acknowledge that you've done something wrong. In that kind of situation, where the husband may be insisting it's my right to beat my wife, and then the police is saying just go home, it's a family issue. That's not victim offender mediation. That's an abuse of the process. Or just generally, with any innovative concept like plea bargain, for example, there is always going to be a tendency of abuse. But once we put measures in place and structure, that's why I said the practice directions that states will develop are very key. You must follow the process. There are risk assessments to determine eligibility. It's not every case that is eligible for restorative justice. It's just not. And even if the case is eligible, when risk assessment is done, the parties may not be eligible. For example, the victim may not be willing, or the offender may not be remorseful. You understand? As a facilitator, you are supposed to be able to discern this and then go back to the judge and say, I know you recommended these people for restorative justice, but I don't think that this case is amenable to restorative justice. Do you understand? So once the key, I feel, is getting people to understand the core ideals of restorative justice. Once they are sold on it, and then there are practice directions, there are laws and frameworks in place, and then the restorative justice doesn't mean you won't have a lawyer. There's still room for representation. Do you understand? So due process is in established, then we can checkmate any form of abuse.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I hope we get there someday in Nigeria. So just
Soon.
before we go, I'd like to call on Barrister Chibueze to say one or two words about, where we are on restorative justice in Nigeria, where what it thinks the future looks like, especially also in the context of what we do at REJA, where it sees us taking restorative justice in a couple more years. Barrister Chibueze, are you here with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much, Esther. I just noticed I and Dr. Jessica are using the same background. Some would think that we're in the same place. We are not. We are just using this. It's like, why are you putting me on the spot? A doctor has said something and you want me to add to it. There's nothing much I can add to what Dr. Jessica has said. Dr. Jessica has said it all, and we most importantly, we want to appreciate you, Ma, for making out the time to be in this program. I knew that you had a very busy schedule this week. Of course, we went to a program last week when I heard you making most of the calls you made, and even with the recent graduation, congratulations once again.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for coming. We really, really, really appreciate you. Esther, I really don't have much to add. Dr. Jessica has said it all, and everything she said is actually the true position of things, both with the law and how we are looking forward. Restorative justice certainly is what I believe would help solve a lot of. Although Dr. Jessica had a bit, of course, because of the way Nigerian police, we all know how they are, they might be a bit funny in using restorative justice, but I feel if they use it very well, it will help remove a lot of cases that end up in the docket of the courts.
Mhm.
Because some of the cases that come to the court are not supposed to be there. There are cases that we
Yeah.
sincerely believe that restorative justice can really work if parties, like she has mentioned, the parameters, the victim is willing, the offender admits guilt, and is willing to make reparations or whatever. If those things work, we believe some of these things can be sorted out in the police station. Of course, we know there are stages to restorative justice. It can come either during investigation, during trial, during sentencing, even when you are serving your sentence, and even post-conviction. Restorative justice can occur in any of these situations. So thank you. I think most importantly, I want to appreciate Dr. Jessica. We know you are very tired. You had a busy week, but thank you for honoring us and making out the time to be here. We do not take it for granted. Thank you very much. Also, everyone that took out the time to come here. I think this is like a crash course for restorative justice. If you are here and you've not learned anything about restorative justice, then you have missed, because everything Dr. Jessica has said is what restorative justice is about. And tomorrow, if you are called anywhere to speak on RJ, you should be able to speak authoritatively after having heard what Dr. Jessica said today. Thank you once again, Doc. I really appreciate you. Over to you, Esther.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much, Dr. Jessica, for joining us again. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to having you with us in consequent times. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope to see you when next we have a webinar or a Twitter space on any issue in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us and do have a very lovely evening. Bye bye.
Thank you.